Welcome to Hamburger Business Review. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and I work at a hamburger restaurant.
And I'm your host, Zach Rose. I just visit hamburger restaurants. Today we're bringing in a very special guest. Kathryn Borel is Mike's partner, and we have some questions.
I'm excited to hear what she thinks. I'm producer Chris Higgins, here to interrogate Kathryn about living with somebody who works at a hamburger restaurant. Program note, we're going to skip the case study for this week.
I'm going to leave and let these guys talk to Kathryn. I'll see you after you're done.
Bye, Mike.
Bye.
So we have asked Mike to leave for a little bit as we bring his partner, Kathryn Borel, who is also her own person, in to talk to us. Kathryn, welcome to Hamburger Business Review. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe before the interrogation gets going?
Thank you for having me. My name is Kathryn Borel, as you said. I am Mike's partner of multiple years, and I've been a hamburger restaurant spouse, I guess, for the last few months. And I work in showbiz as a writer. And we're just here trying to survive until 2025, as we say in my industry.
Nice.
How are you holding up?
Fine. I mean, there have been better years in my industry, but I think we're going to pull through and everything will be fine.
How are you holding up as a burger partner?
I love being a burger partner. I wish there was conflict to my answer, but it's like, so I guess going back into the past in terms of like where this all started for us, much of the reason that Mike started working at the hamburger restaurant was because of all of these conversations we were having about the fact that he had how can I say it? Mike for a long time did not work. I was doing great in the industry. Mike had been let go from a job that he was sort of feeling lukewarm about. Mike is one of those people who is brilliant, a jack of all trades, can find purpose in almost anything he does. And so when he got let go from his job, I said, take 6 months, figure out what you want to do next so that you can go into your next endeavor with like passion and purpose and a sense of what you want. Those 6 months kind of turned into a year and I was like, that's fine. And then the pandemic hit and it was obviously harder for everybody to find a job. And then 3 years went by. So that sort of initial 6-month period turned into a year and then that turned into 4 years. And then we were at like year 5 and I was just like working a lot and then finding him in bed playing a lot of Sudoku and making progress like with his Sudoku journey, which was great. But I think we were both feeling a sense of stasis in the house. And, I think that when somebody is robbed of purpose and direction and in a state of stasis, when you write a screenplay, the moment that the character decides to do something new is called the inciting incident. And that's where the hero's journey begins. Mm-hmm. I was really like trying to urge Mike to begin his own hero's journey. But I think that's also like a daunting task when you've kind of like been in a state of like a little bit of like emotional disarray and stillness for a long time. And so I think that became more and more daunting for Mike. We got to the point where I was like, you can just do anything. Like you don't even have to pursue your passion. What if you just like got out of bed in the morning and maintained a schedule and just did like literally anything? I have no ego when it comes to what my partner does. I'm not one of those people who needs to show up at a party and go like, my boyfriend is a high-powered Hollywood lawyer. He will own your ass.
Well, that's good because he's not currently.
Because he really isn't. And I think I would hate being partnered with someone like that. But, it's really hard to start after you've kind of been in a state of emotional atrophy for a long time. And so there was this moment where he had gone on a bike ride and there's this place that's about 7 miles away from wwhere we live that's called the Donut Hut. Policemen like stop at the Donut Hut, get a coffee, get a donut. And on this particular day when Mike was on a solo bike ride, he, I guess, had a casual conversation with this older man who must have been in his late 60s. And in the way that it's easier to confide in a stranger than it is to some of your closest friends or family, I guess he ended up having a little bit of an existential conversation in terms of where he was at. And the guy was like, how old are you? And Mike was like, I'm 47. And he was like, oh my God, you're a kid. You're like a teen, basically. And so Mike came home after that afternoon. And he said, this guy at the Donut Hut said I was like a teen. So what if I started thinking about myself as a teen, just starting out? What would a teen do for their first job? And he was like, I had a job at a hamburger restaurant when I was 17 years old, so why don't I just do that again if this man is telling me that I'm a teen? And that was sort of like the spark that made him go into the process of applying for the hamburger restaurant and then getting a job. And I mean, I think that internal transformation and going from stillness to action is one of the hardest things to do. You know, if you think about, like, Zach, you have a herniated disc, right?
Yeah, in recovery.
And I feel like when someone gets a herniated disc, it kind of like sneaks up on you. You're like, I did one weird move, or I started moving in a different way, or I was like maybe overweight and I lost weight, or there are so many extenuating factors that have to do with sort of stasis and stillness that can like injure you in a way that is so difficult to overcome. And I sort of feel like that was Mike. You know, he had sort of injured himself in a way. He just needed to take the first step on this iterative journey to health again.
He needed the equivalent of the ARC trainer. He needed something that like wouldn't hurt, but would be doable and make you know, something you could turn into a habit, a process.
Exactly. A habit, a process, a structure. And so it's been really inspiring to see him go from somebody who was essentially spending his life as a professional Sudoku player, unremunerated, to somebody who's getting up every morning at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, putting in his hours, you know, doing creative work for Hamburger Business Review and his other creative endeavors, going into the restaurant. And it's provided the sort of like structure and purpose to all of his days that I find just moving, inspiring, and really laudable. So I'm super proud of him.
Wonderful. Do you remember, were you with Mike when he had these sort of professional managerial type jobs?
Yes, I was with him during 2 of his jobs. And in one of them, he was desperately unhappy because there was a complete failure of leadership. And Mike does very poorly when he needs to improvise on the job, especially when it comes to things like tech. He was working in the crypto space, which is, you know, just like selling magic beans, basically. And he was like, I'm really confused about my job selling magic beans. It's like, yeah, because it's not real and completely useless to the pursuit of human existence. So it makes sense that you're having an existential crisis based on this job. And then in his other job, it was a little bit of a case of a boss not exactly knowing what to do with Mike. And so sending him on these kind of like wild goose chases on the job, trying to create purpose. Because the thing about Mike, as I'm sure you know, he's this incredibly intelligent person, but you really have to like launch him in a direction in order to get the best out of him and give him a structure.
Right.
And so when he went into the hamburger restaurant, I was like, it's kind of the best of both worlds, both business and leisure, which is like, here is a place that has such an established structure, more than 1 billion customers served, et cetera. What are we at, like 2 billion?
I don't even know anymore.
Do we know
6?
Do we know
8?
how many?
Yeah, I don't know.
Pretty much all of them.
As a result, obviously, it's going to have an incredibly rigorous and well-oiled structure. And then also, it's like a video game. You know, there's like buttons to push. You got to make sure. Like, one of my favorite games growing up was on the on the Game Boy. Was Burger Time. You know, where you would have to like you were like a little chef and you'd eat the burgers and then you'd have to make these burgers. And it was just like there was something that was so satisfying about it because in every step there was like an immediate reward. And I feel like that's what is sort of that like gerbil hitting, you know, the lever to get the pellet. Like I feel like Mike is doing that every 15 minutes at the hamburger restaurant. Plus it's super social and Mike is an incredibly winning personality, you know, and he loves to be part of a community because he grew up in remote Alaska without many people around him. So my joke about Mike is that, you know, he's a guy who's just happy to be here. And and as a result, you know, it's like I think he's a really valuable member of the team based on what I'm hearing because he's affable, he loves to help, he can really find his position in an ecosystem that is well established. Obviously, it's exhausting. Obviously, there's an element to it that feels like it's maybe quote unquote below his station, you know, whatever that means. But by and large, like he comes home every day with like stories, a good attitude, and a feeling of contribution. And I kind of can't ask for anything more from, you know, having like a debrief with my partner at the end of a workday.
Well, and to Zach's earlier point, it sounds like that's different than what was happening in his previous gig. Like the coming home experience.
Yeah, hugely.
Yeah. That's what I'm curious about.
A lot of the conversations that we were having in those like professional managerial class jobs were like, I don't know if I did my tasks today. I don't know if I am pleasing my boss. My boss was unclear, so I am unclear about what I am doing.
Right.
And I think with those jobs that are sort of content creation jobs, what's the metric on success for that kind of stuff? You know, it's like, it's really hard to measure.
Exactly.
You know, there's that saying, like, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Like at the hamburger restaurant, it's literally everything is measured. Therefore, literally everything exists.
If it can't be measured, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Sorry. If it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. Exactly.
Well, and I think with Mike especially, he's the kind of thinker, I think, who probably succeeds well when someone says, you have succeeded. Like, I think he needs that reinforcement. I have a lot of experience being in jobs where I'm not sure what the hell is going on. Have I added value today? Is the job done? How, it can be very ambiguous. And if part of your makeup is a little bit of anxiousness or whatever, that can lead you to a lot of self-doubt. Whereas, did I put the burger in the thing and give it to the person? Yeah. And then did I come from time A to time B and then leave? Yeah. Job complete.
There's an objective measure for all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I also think that, we all work in tech adjacent or creative adjacent or full tech and creative spaces. And I am never not thinking about my job as a writer. The idea of taking off your hamburger restaurant shirt and being like, I'm going to put on my civvies and be a civilian in the world and not have to deal with the 8-hour day that I just worked, like, that feels like a miracle. And it feels like also something that exists less now, unless you are explicitly in a service industry,
Yes.
Mike seems like he's working really hard on all this podcasting stuff, editing a lot of videos together and stuff like that. Is he able to step away from the hamburger world at large, or is his head sort of always there?
Oh, that's such a good question. No, Mike is in the burger world. He's like in for a penny, in for a quarter pounder, man. He is always thinking about it. There's so much preparation that goes into waking up at 5:45 in the morning, making sure he's not eating only hamburger restaurant food. They only give him 2 uniforms, right? So he's got to be constantly like washing those 2 uniforms so that they don't smell like fry grease. He only has 1 hat. So like there's hat management, and then there is hamburger business review. And then we do our own personal podcast as well. So I think Mike has said on the podcast before that he can only really do one other thing beyond be at the hamburger restaurant, 1 or 2 other things. So he comes back from work, he does hamburger business review stuff, he does some of our podcast stuff, and maybe he can get a workout in, but that's sort of his day. It almost feels zen, like chop wood, carry water kind of thing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is that good or is that bad, or do we know yet that he lives in burger world now?
Is it good that he lives in burger world? This is a really interesting question because it makes me think, how much are any of us diversified in terms of what we think about and the pursuits that we have, right? And this kind of speaks to a larger question or a larger thought that I'm having about him at the burger restaurant and about how our value can be applied in the world and where value comes from. And, in late stage capitalism, where
yada, yada, yeah.
How do we exhibit our value? And I guess I want to answer the question like this. Is it good that Mike lives 85% of the time in burger world? I think because he is approaching it from a multidisciplinary perspective, from an analytical perspective, from an embedded perspective, from a gamesmanship perspective, from a compassion perspective. I think that it is fine. I think that if you were only thinking about one thing in one certain way, maybe that can be a trap. But because Mike is such a curious person and because he's always thinking about things from multiple different angles and taking the side door in and, he loves a system and he loves to break a system. That's who Mike is. And so because he's always attacking a subject from multiple different angles, I think that it's not good or bad, like it's a value neutral thing, but it's definitely interesting. And I think that for me, interesting is good.
He mentioned having this heavy-duty deodorant. Does it work?
The heavy-duty deodorant is a deodorant that he lifted from our athletic club, the Los Angeles Athletic Club.
There's so much that you're telling us that we don't know about, by the way.
Really?
Like we never heard about the guy at the donut place. We never heard there's only 2 uniforms. We didn't know there was only 1 hat. The deodorant, I mean, we have heard about it, but we didn't hear that it was, illicitly gained.
The reason that he got it was because he came home one day and I was like, what is that intoxicating smell? And he was like, that is the deodorant from the athletic club. It is an old school 1987 style canister deodorant. It's Right Guard. And I'm like, you smell like the platonic ideal of a man who's just come off a construction work site.
Yes.
And I found it so erotic. And as a result, he was like, I'm going to steal this deodorant if my partner is finding it that erotic. And so that is and it covers everything. It's incredible. It actually like eclipses the fry grease smell. There was one night where I walked into our bedroom because he goes to bed super early now. And I walked into our bedroom and there was like a smell, like a thick smell of food. And I was like, okay, he's got to absolutely shower every time he comes back from the hamburger restaurant. But that particular deodorant really is like, it's not even like it doesn't even cover the odor. It is like an odor antagonist.
It's its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's its own thing. Exactly. I don't know if you know, this is a very fun fact. This is one of my fun facts, but one of the only scents, if not the only scent, that is the main odor antagonist to the smell of rotting corpse is artificial cinnamon flavor and smell. Oh,
yeah, I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah.
Actually, before we get to this, I just want to follow up on the odor thing. That's like that's the burger in the room, right? Is like, as the partner of someone who is in an environment that exposes him to smells, very specific smells, what of that carries back into the home? And how do you feel about that?
It is mainly fry grease that I smell. Mm-hmm. I was expecting that it would be worse than it is. And it's actually fine. And as long as he showers before bed, everything is fine. But I didn't have any anxieties about Mike going to work at the hamburger restaurant beyond exactly that. I thought it would just be like fried chicken smell, which is like delicious smelling, but it's not something that you want to smell 24/7. I recently got a smoker that I built in the backyard, and because I was like, what if I become my neighborhood pit master?
Right.
And I was like, everyone will be delighted because I'll be smoking a brisket or whatever. And then I was like, but I might also become public enemy number one by doing that. And that's what I kind of assumed with Mike. I was like, what if he becomes my public enemy number one because he always smells like fry grease? But it really hasn't been an issue. I'm grateful for that because I have a really, I have a thing where if there is a smell in the house, it will drive me clinically insane until I find the source of the smell. There was once, a bunch of years ago, I had this old vintage Mexican citrus press, and there was a smell in my house. I didn't know where it was coming from. And then finally, after weeks, I looked in the Mexican citrus press, and there was like an orange rind that had turned into like penicillin dust. And I was like, oh, that's where the smell is coming from. Thank God. But yeah, so I am a person who would have been susceptible to that kind of sensitivity, but it hasn't really occurred, which I feel grateful for.
You know, you've talked about the start, how this job functions as a beginning for Mike, right? It's sort of a catalyst into the next thing. What is your sense of how this will end for him? And like, for instance, do you think 6 months from now, do you think he'll still be at the hamburger restaurant, or will he be on some other part of the hero's journey?
No, it's a good question. Like there's that idea in the old like Scandinavian myth of Iron John. There is this like moment where Iron John, after like he encounters the wild man and stares into the river and, you know, goes off on the horse, he goes into his what's called the ashes phase, and he has to go down into the kitchen and work in the kitchen and just like be put through his paces in the heat and in the ash and all of that stuff. And so I'm really considering this part of Mike's life, his ashes phase, which also makes me feel uncomfortable because, you know, the thing that this project butts up against is class tourism.
Yeah.
Luckily, I haven't had a sense of that at all since he's been there because he's just going about it with such honesty and hard work and purpose. But yeah, I'm really aware of the fact that, you know, we're in a position if, like, fingers crossed in 2025, my industry picks up again, we will potentially be in the position to argo him out of the hamburger restaurant and, you know, back into like my own creative space where he can help me with my work because he's really, really indispensable on certain projects because he's such a great creative thinker. And so, you know, part of me is like, no, I don't think he's going to be working at the hamburger restaurant in 6 months because I'm hoping that I get to like employ him within my industry and put him to work as a researcher, sort of like associate producer kind of role. But I have been thinking a lot about how sad it's going to be when he leaves the hamburger restaurant. He's developed like real relationships there, and people have come to rely on him. He's an asset to that team. The people who he works with, in terms of how he describes them, are just so earnest, hardworking, committed, kind, collaborative. There are not a lot of places that I've seen in my life and in sort of like all of the different situations that I've worked in, which is, mainly either journalism or television, which are highly collaborative industries. When he describes the type of collaboration that exists there, it is the type of rare and special that I have only experienced like once every 5 years, of everyone being on the same page, of everyone having a common goal and a common purpose, everyone being kind to one another, everyone, if a mistake is made, everyone gathering around, fixing the mistake, moving on. It feels like a really shame-free space, which I think is incredibly rare in the world, which has been such a surprise.
Maybe it's rare in the jobs that we do,
We're in the jobs that we do, exactly. So, I'm so sequestered over in creative writer, rarefied showbiz land that, I don't want to make any judgments on other people's industries. This might exist all over the place. I just haven't personally experienced it. So I know I am going to feel, I think, grief probably when he leaves it, because this has been a really special, transformative time for our relationship, for Mike himself. I don't necessarily think that it is for him for the long term, but I guess that's just the thing about life, I guess. You like sometimes you just end up in a space that is more transitional, and that's kind of beautiful, and it's kind of sad because it's not supposed to last forever. I'm trying not to like pre-grieve when he leaves it, because I also think that he'll be incredibly relieved not to be waking up at 5:45 every morning and becoming like incredibly exhausted, because he's a middle-aged man, right? Like in a way, the hamburger restaurant feels like more of a young man or a young woman's game, even though there are a ton of people who are older than him working at it. So yeah, I'm conflicted about the project in that sense, because it challenges our ideas about class and station and race. And so I'm just trying to kind of be like open and aware of my feelings about it, rather than planting a flag in some political stance or, like having any other thoughts about it beyond what is happening in the day.
The irreducible fact of human labor is the body. And as the partner of somebody who's going off and doing labor that he's not used to doing, and then he comes home, what do you perceive going on in his body that's different now?
Mike aches now, like Mike has to take care of his feet. He wears compression socks. I have an urge to, like a 1950s housewife, like put him on the couch, strip off his compression socks and give him like acupressure, I want him to do like salt soaks. I want his lower back to be okay. It's very much like factory work, right? And that's one of the things that I find noble about the job too. He's really putting his body on the line. Like, it's difficult to stand on your feet, but it is hard and worthy of such consideration and care. And I'm happy that Mike has a place to come back to where there's a Theragun and he has a jock girlfriend who is like happy to rub his feet and, happy to remind him to go and like take a bath if he wants to, because I think a lot of people who work there probably don't have time for that stuff. And so again, like I feel very grateful that there is a space here, for, which hopefully we can sustain if I ever get work in my industry again, where he has the time and space to take care of himself after his shifts. Because I'm very aware of the fact that probably a lot of people he works with do not have that time and space.
I have a couple of just sort of factual questions that I'm curious about. Do you wash the uniforms? Who does the laundry in this situation?
One of the things that I love to do for Mike is when he's asleep early at 9:00, which is when he goes to sleep, I like to come into his office, grab his hamburger restaurant uniform, stick it in the laundry, run it, dry it, fold it like I'm a Gap assistant, put and lay it all out so that it's ready for him. I like to pack his lunch, put a little label on his lunch that says his name, Kenneth.
His work name, yeah.
His work name, Kenneth, with smiley faces and hearts.
Aww.
And I prep the coffee so that he can just like touch the button and have a cup of coffee. And I am somebody who derives a lot of my own self-worth from like being valuable to others. And when Mike wasn't working and he was a bedridden professional Sudoku player, I didn't have a lot of opportunities to be of service to him because he was barely being of service to himself. So there was not that much space for me to do that. And I was not really compelled to because I was working really hard and full of resentment. But now that he's going off and working so hard, it's just like, it's such a joy to support him.
Yeah.
And yeah, we don't have a lot of time together anymore because we're sort of on like opposite schedules. So we're a little bit two ships in the night. So it's almost like washing his uniform as like a love letter to him, you know?
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah. I do feel like those acts of care, service, attention, love, even not in the presence of the person who's receiving those things, that's about intimacy, right? And like, I'm the Mike in my current situation, and I'm on this like protracted job search, and it's not going great, but we're getting there. And, you know, being in that situation, I am really aware of that like all the time. And I'm really worried about what that implies on the other side. And I suspect Mike has been aware of that too, even if that didn't lead to like a, you know, successful outcome in a different job. But like now that he has launched into this, that does sound like there's a move there. There's a move in a valued direction. And I kind of think that's what we all just try to do as people, right?
We had this really crazy watershed moment in therapy today where I was talking about my financials for the year, which has been such a difficult year in showbiz because of the strike and the adjustment and the fact that our industry is contracting. And my financials this year are the worst they've been in 14 years, which is so hard because I really do feel like I'm at the top of my game, like talent-wise, curiosity-wise, execution-wise. And so it's been really difficult to make 10 times as less money as I did in 2019. So it was like a little bit of like a shot to the guts.
Sorry, 2019 or 2009?
2019. So yeah, I
pre-pandemic.
Yeah, the money I made this year is like 10 times less than the year before the pandemic. And which is, you know, dramatic. And I was crying about it in therapy like a little bitch. And Mike was responding to me crying, and our therapist was asking him questions in the way that therapists do. The therapist said, how do you feel about the fact that Kathryn is feeling so emotional about what she sees as a personal failure, but probably more has to do with structure? And he responded with compassion and like intellectually, but also saying, but I believe so much in her that I know it's not going to be like this forever. Like something is bound to change because I believe so much in her and her hard work and her talent. And it was really nice to hear. And our therapist does this thing where when she hits upon something that has changed, she does this thing. Her name is Sadie. She will lean, and she does like Sadie's lean. And when she leans in your direction, like she's about to get you, like she is about to make you cry. And she started leaning, and I'm like, oh God, what direction is she leaning in? If it's at me, I'm going to cry even harder. But she was leaning in the direction of Mike. And I was like, all right, what does she have? What does she have in her quiver? What arrow is she going to shoot him with? And the arrow that she shot him with was the fact that he was not feeling any shame or recrimination or humiliation over the fact that he had contributed to the sort of like financial disarray of our current situation. Whereas in the past, he would have felt such shame and probably burst into tears and talked about regret.
Yeah.
But this time he was able to just be fully present.
Yeah.
Like in my feeling, without shame. And our therapist pointed that out. And she was like, this is a huge moment of transformation for you. And then he started to cry like a little bitch.
And then how did you feel about that?
That he was a little bitch. No.
No. The jock thing again, huh?
No, I felt f***ing thrilled. I was just like, again, like, these moments of internal transformation, it's so hard for people, especially white men in their mid-40s. You guys don't have to change. You're fine. You're on the Jetsons conveyor belt of just like everything's cool. The patriarchy will dress you and wash you and keep you in a state of protected dominance. And so there's no reason for you guys to self-examine or change. So whenever I come across a Gen X adjacent man who's doing the work and in a state of transformation, I'm just like, throw that mother a parade.
Yeah, you're proud of him.
I'm proud of him. Yeah, hugely proud of him.
Yeah. You mentioned 3-Minute Review. I have been a consumer of this for a while now.
Our famous podcast, 100 listeners.
I didn't know you killed somebody.
Oh, I did kill somebody, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to hear about that,
Not
where
on
would they go?
I'm dying to do it on purpose, though. Just to see how it feels.
Am I allowed to delete this file, or is that like an evidentiary problem?
No, just put it on the internet.
Okay, it's in the show. One thing that comes up in 3-Minute Review at times is your parents, Kathryn. I have never, in my discussions with Mike, heard much of anything about his like biological family.
He has one.
I'm sure that he does. But what do your parents think about this?
My parents love it. My parents are so in support of it. They call him Mighty Mike since he's been working at their hamburger restaurant, which is just the cutest thing in the entire world. No, they are as receptive to that moment where someone goes from stasis to action as I am. My dad grew up in World War II France. His family was there until the 50s. My grandfather was a resistance fighter. So they were just like being chased around by the French Gestapo during the entire Second World War. And so my dad was just completely traumatized by the war, and that echoed into his life. And, you know, he grew up in a state of extreme poverty and, you know, had to go to work for his family at the age of 13. And much later in life, like after almost, I think, losing my mom because their marriage was really on the skids, experienced his own sort of come to Jesus moment that, you know, allowed him to like sort of fall on his knees and apologize to my mom for all the stuff that he had done to her within the relationship. So, you know, my dad is an 85-year-old man who experienced a moment of profound transformation like 20 years ago, you know, at 65, which again, like is not common for like a tall, handsome white man in North America, really relates to what Mike is going through and thinks that it is noble and good and makes him and my mom trust him so much more as well. Like just knows that if shit hits the fan, like Mike's going to stand up and do something. You know, it's created, like you mentioned, intimacy before. It is like created a level of intimacy that we did not experience before. There's trust now because I know that he can go up and like get up and do something that is hard over and over again. It's like one thing to do something one time. I'm so allergic to grand gestures because I think they're a cop-out, you know? I think they're a Band-Aid solution. I think that the real people in this world who I trust and consider comrades are people who like get up and do something hard over and over again. And that's what Mike is doing. And, you know, because of like my father's background and my mother's background, she grew up in like a Welsh coal mining town with a father who was a coal miner, also extremely poor. Like my family is a family that just values hard work, you know? Like we're blue collar people and, you know, that like, because my dad had a bunch of luck and again, because he was like a very handsome French white man who like was in North America and was able to like cannily work his way through the system. Yeah. Ended up with more than he started with, but it's like fundamentally like my parents understand poverty, understand a blue collar existence, value that, honor it, and are seeing Mike, participate in that. And, yeah, and they're incredibly proud of him, and they loved him before, but they really love him now.
Mike in the HBR chat has said, Kathryn's job is brutal feedback. That's brutal feedback in all caps. And also, trust me, she is good at this. What's some brutal feedback that you've given to Mike?
I think the most brutal feedback that I've ever given to Mike was that he lacks rigor.
Wow.
Which is harsh, you know, like, especially coming from somebody who's like, I value authenticity, rigor, and not being a wimp, you know, which relates to rigor.
In what sense is Mike not like when you said it, what kind of lack of rigor were we thinking about?
that he doesn't like to work hard.
Okay.
And this is like before the hamburger restaurant, but when we were on the rocks, which was last year at this time, it's that time where you're just like, well, now you can just like say everything that is bugging you about your partner, because it's either going to result in a catastrophic breakup or a like catastrophic push through into the next phase of the relationship. Luckily, it was the latter rather than the former. But yeah, that was my brutal feedback. But I also think that he would agree with that. I don't give brutal feedback for the sake of brutal feedback. I give it when I have decided to stop people pleasing and enabling the people around me if I am in a position to enable them, and I want to actually like come correct in the relationship because the relationship is meaningful to me, which my relationship with Mike obviously is. Yeah, my balls to the wall, lack of rigor. Now, I would not say the same thing because he has proven himself to be extremely rigorous. And, that's why I love the hamburger restaurant. That's why I worship at the altar of the hamburger restaurant for birthing rigor in my partner.
How do we thank you? Do you have anything else you want to plug or talk about?
No, this is great. It was really nice to speak emotionally about the hamburger restaurant with you guys.
Kathryn, if in the future we need to call upon someone to be a class or French class correspondent, you may be available for that?
Yes, of course. Oh my God, my pleasure. Please.
All right. Thank you, Kathryn, for being with us.
That was super fun.
We appreciate it. We may have to call you back at some point because this is very productive.
I would love to be called back into the world of hamburgers and hamburger restaurant.
I'm going to guess that Mike is losing his shit out there somewhere. So can you bring him back?
He just peeked in like a dog. Like when a dog bumps the door open.
Like, can I come back?
Sweetie, you're allowed to come back. You can talk about your hamburger restaurant now. I talked about how proud I was of you.
Oh, I heard.
Oh, you did?
Oh.
You have thoughts?
I have thoughts. 5, not 5, not 5:45.
Oh, come on.
Controversy.
Whatever.
5 a.m. It's a big difference.
Whatever, dude. All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks for having
Kathryn.
me.
Thanks, Kathryn.
Great questions. I had such a nice time talking with you. Goodbye.
Producer Chris here. We made an executive decision on the fly. We're throwing out the outline because Mike apparently was listening through the wall or something. Explain that. Where have you been for the last, whatever it's been, 40 minutes?
Down the hall in the other bedroom on my iPad.
Uh-huh.
But then I heard a couple things. I don't know. I don't have to go in and critique, but I do wake up at 5 a.m., not 5:45. That's a big difference to me.
Okay.
That's it, really.
That's it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit curious. Did it change anything for you guys, or what did you get out of that conversation?
You got the whole idea from a dude at a donut shop?
You never told us about that.
You never told us about that.
Oh. Yeah. I just was like out on my own. I brought my little digital book reader with me, and I was like, I'm going to have a donut, sip my coffee, have a little time by myself. Nope. Chatty old man comes along and has thoughts. And so, yeah, I ended up just being like, you know what? I'm just going to have to chat with this guy, and it's fine. It's like one of the benefits of stopping at a donut shop in Los Angeles.
Are you like at a booth? Is there are you at a park bench?
It's like a table outside. Yeah, just outside he's just walking by. Yeah, so he was standing, I was sitting. Mm-hmm. I'm in my like weird, bike shorts and athletic shirt or whatever.
And you had that, I don't know, as men do, that sense that this man wants to talk to me?
He mentioned something kind of in passing, and then I made, I made the mistake of giving like a little bit of a clever comment back, and I was like, oh, we're locked in now. He's not going anywhere. Yeah. And he's clearly a regular, and so I was like, okay, this is fine. There's an aspect of it that I was like, oh, is this me in the future? If I stay on this path of like not really knowing what I'm doing, is this, also what would I say to myself 20 years in the past? And what does that look like? And I was like, oh, well, I guess what I realized is like, I actually am in the position of speaking to myself 20 years ago if I think about 20 years in the future. And so then you're like, well, what do I want to change?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that came up. Oh, and the other thing I was struggling with was this whole thing where my license expired and I had to take the driving test again, and I failed it once, and I was up in my head about that. Uh-huh. And so this idea of, being 17 was like, well, I have to get my driver's license and I have to get a job, which just felt very like, I was like, maybe I have to go to college. I've never been to college. So maybe that's next.
Go to the army. Yeah.
Yeah, too late to enlist, actually. I'm too old now.
I don't know if there's anything else that's sort of surprising. Zach, does anything stick out at you?
About Kathryn's interview?
Yeah.
Just how proud she is.
Yeah.
I was expecting her to be tired of Mike and his hamburger stuff, but it was the total opposite. Because sometimes I'm a little bit tired of Mike and his hamburger stuff, and I live 4,000 miles away.
Before we get to McTrot, though, I want to talk business. So for those of you at home who are businesses, represent a business, have other commercial interests, have you found yourself wondering how you could be on this show, how you could reach the audience that we reach, the business and burger savvy listeners of Hamburger Business Review? Well, imagine if the three of us could talk about your business, your product, your service, whatever. Wouldn't that be profitable? Wouldn't that be lovely for you? Wouldn't that help your bottom line? If that sounds appealing to you, reach out to us at hamburgerbusinessreview.com for information about becoming a podcast sponsor. We are currently not sponsored, but we want to be, and you can help. As we're recording this, Zach, I think we're now, less than 24 hours away? Is that true from McTrot?
We're less than 12 hours away. Yeah, I'm going to start at 4:30 in the morning. It's a little past 7 p.m. now.
You gonna have enough time to sleep between now and then?
I've been kind of resting and taking it easy today. I took the day off work to sort of rest up, and I'm going to get some sleep before.
So as I understand it, Zach, you're going to attempt to visit 48 McDonald's restaurants, which is all of the McDonald's in Manhattan, within a 24-hour period, starting as we record this tomorrow morning on foot, meaning no transit, no taxis, no skateboards, no bikes, you're walking. That's going to be a long 24 hours. Oh, by the way, you also have to order something at each restaurant.
And consume it. You've
been training for this literally all year. How ready are you?
My partner asked me the same question. I'll scrub that. Yeah, I'm feeling ready.
For the audience at home, Zach gave a long answer, and we deleted it. I want to know, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
The known parts are that it's going to be pretty rainy in the morning. I'm going to try and get up to Inwood, which is the northern part of Manhattan, at 4:15. I'm going to try and eat my first bag of apple slices at 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to make my way down. The route I still need to look at. I still have a few more dots to put on my map and finish the map. I think I can get it done. It's different than last year's in that I'm not doing like a clockwise or a counterclockwise thing. I'm trying to zigzag as I work my way down the island of Manhattan. I don't know if that's going to feel longer or shorter or faster or what.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I'm going to be a lot faster for this year, given my training, and like sort of more resilient, less needing to rest as much. But I don't know. It remains to be seen.
Are there benchmarks along the way that you think, okay, if I'm at this point in the run by a certain time, or so, you know what I mean? Like that's you're on good pace?
The hardest part is that there's a McDonald's down on Varick Street that closes at 10:30 p.m. And that's one of the last 4 or 5 that I'd want to hit. It's really going to be about getting to the first one that opens at 6 on time and getting to that one that closes at 10:30. I think if I'm in Midtown late afternoon, I think I have a chance.
Your pace is going to be faster this year, I expect, just because of fitness level and energy going into it third year. I feel like, do you have a sense of what halfway is yet, since it's not with the zigzag pattern? Does that change where that marker is for you?
Not really. There's a lot, like we were talking about with all that math. I haven't done any of that. And I'm just going to be looking at the map and trying to make the best plan that I can. But yeah, I think somewhere between Midtown and 33rd, there's a lot of McDonald's in that area. To be making it through that part of town at time, like 1 p.m. maybe, I think that'll feel good if I can get there.
You mentioned the start in Inwood, and also that a restaurant closes at 10:30. But if you're starting at like 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. or whatever, are you going to go to the one that closes at 10:30 and then keep going to more until the following 4 a.m.?
Yeah, if I'm not making good time, I'll have to just kind of abort wherever I'm at.
Oh, you got to like ditch, run, do that one, and then continue somehow?
Yeah, and then continue with the ones that are also not open 24 hours. And then once I've got those done, I have until 4:30 in the morning to finish.
And so you expect to finish this, early the next morning, right? Like close to that 4 a.m. time frame. Can you put yourself forward into that? What's that looking like? At that point, you've been doing this for literally 20 plus hours.
I'm probably very tired. I'm very happy to be at the last McDonald's.
Happy or like relieved?
Yeah, the same thing. Glad to be done. I remember feeling that last year. I don't know. I think I'm having a hard time imagining how I'm going to feel. I sort of have a little bit of expectation that I'm going to be like dramatically faster this year, but I don't know. I'm trying not to hold on to that too much, feeling like I'll be happy if I finish in one way or another. But there's a chance that, I don't know, that it could seem like I'm really flying and really making a different type of year this year. There's just so much I don't know. The last 2 years, I've done a 4-hour nap in the middle of this, and I'm not doing that this year. I think that what was exciting about the first year was I had no idea if it would be very doable or not doable at all. And it was just that curiosity was enough to sort of keep me going. And I think to some extent, like, that's necessary. And changing the route is a way to keep that alive.
Zach, I was Googling earlier based on that number you gave us of, I believe it was over 70,000 steps. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think it's 70,000.
Apparently a marathon is somewhere in the 50,000s, like, 52 to 55,000-ish. Personally, I think that's kind of an interesting benchmark. When you hit that pedometer mark, you have then walked a marathon, which even doing that is honestly quite a lot.
Yeah, it's funny to compare. It's also very well supported. Like, I can have McDonald's whenever I want, and I can have as much of it as I want.
Well, I mean, we can influence the format of all future marathons via McTrot, right?
Right. And also, I've known some people who have done the Pacific Crest Trail, where you're trying to make miles, and you're hiking 20 miles a day easily, oftentimes more than that. And they have a metric that they use I've heard called 10 before 10, which is 10 miles before 10 a.m. That's kind of a compelling target to hit. Yeah, I'm trying to, I've had a new pair of shoes for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I hope they work.
Oh, yeah.
I'm carrying Moleskin. I'm carrying Tegaderm. I'm carrying various balms and things.
And so these are in case of a foot injury or a sore spot kind of thing?
Yeah, like abrasion or just a hot spot. Has
it happened in previous years?
No, it's always something unexpected.
Right.
It's never the feet.
Yeah. And it's funny because the sense I'm getting from you, the vibe I'm getting from you, it's like if you were to put inspiring music under it, I think the vibe is almost like tension, but without the musical cue, it's or it could be exhaustion or resignation. It's really unclear sometimes, unless there's somebody telling you emotionally how to process what's going on. Do you have an emotional valence that's going on right now?
I've been listening to the Rocky IV training montage, which is my favorite training montage in the Rocky series because it's...
Yes. This has come up in my documentary work previously, by the way.
For me, it's the montage of the rugged American spirit with the rugged Russian spirit and the contrast to Drago, who's on the machines and, has the technology. I don't know what that has to do with McTrot, but...
Well, it's the mechanical side of the mechanization of the food that's being processed on the McDonald's side versus your limits of it's just you walking to every single location, right? It's a compare and contrast those two.
That works. Yeah, happy with that.
Zach, what's the plan in terms of checking in with your family or, God forbid, the group chat during the course of the event? And you also probably are going to record some stuff here and there, like last year, on your phone.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping you guys might text me and ask me questions that I can voice memo back to you on the run.
But do you have anything where your partner's look, I need to know every hour that you're good? Or is she going to, is there a way to follow your location in some limited way?
She's not too worried. It's fine. The first year that I did this, my partner was working a 24-hour shift at the hospital. Mm-hmm. The second year, we had a 1-month-old, and that was a little bit tough.
Oh, that's totally different.
And it was tough because I'm a parent. I was super, present for the early part of my child's life, still am. And it's a lot to deal with yourself and even with a 1-month-old. And so I wound up calling in one of her friends to come in and sort of be with her while I was out there. Mm-hmm. But it was also hard because that was the second year. And the second year is not quite a tradition. The second year is just something you're doing again. Now the third year is much different. It's, our child is 1 year old. She almost sleeps through the night. It's good. 3 times makes a tradition, I think.
You're doing this right before Thanksgiving. Well, I mean, it's 5 days before or something like that. Do you think that's going to influence your experience of Thanksgiving at all?
It's going to be a strange Thanksgiving. I'm feeling especially thankful for a lot of things in my life. The chance to do this is definitely one of those things. There's a Thanksgiving vibe I have with movies like Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, about getting somewhere, about being, about having your priorities, but having your priorities interact with those around you. And McTrot seems like there's an aspect of it that is very self-centered. It's a sport played by one person, invented by one person, watched by barely one person. It's a kind of sport where sportsmanship is out in the world. You have to be a sportsman to everybody that you're coming across, whether they're working at McDonald's, whether they're ordering something, whether they're on the sidewalk. So there is sort of a Thanksgivingness to it in that way.
I think it's a lovely way to leave it. I guess the last thing I'm really curious about is like, do you think you're going to sleep heavily tonight or not?
Oh yeah, are there nerves?
There are some nerves. I think just preparing for anything this much makes you, when the real thing comes, it makes you realize how much time you spent or, how much you've thought about it, and here it's happening. But I'm sure the baby will get up crying at 3 a.m. and then I'll comfort her and then get on the train to Inwood.
Good luck, Godspeed. We're all going to be following you, Zach, and bugging you on text and hoping for the best success.
Thank you.
Hamburger Business Review is an independent production. You can become a supporter at hamburgerbusinessreview.com. You can also buy some merch there. You can leave a comment. You can make suggestions. You can sign up for our newsletter. That is hamburgerbusinessreview.com.
Please rate and review us on your podcast app. As you know from all the other podcasts, this really helps others find the show.
We're back next week with the case study we were going to cover this episode, more on Mike's Hamburger Restaurant, the outcome of McTrot 2024, and how McDonald's touches everything.
I'm Mike Merrill.
I'm Zach Rose.
And I'm Chris Higgins. Our theme music is from Jonna Bechtolt's Jazz Around. Our social media manager is Colette Wacker, and our graphic designer is Chris Knapp. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you next week. Has Mike, in fact, left?
He's gone.
Okay, great.
He's dead.
He took care of
that.
Yeah. Zach, do you mind if I take over some talking? Because I'm hearing some...
I've got a Labrador here who's
got a
going
situation?
nuts.
Yeah.
Could I have just 2 minutes to see what I can do with him besides?
Totally.
Thanks.
It's such a dad mode, like the baby's crying in the background.
Oh yeah, I hear there's like the baby, then there's like there's a toy and it's like pointing against something and there's the growling and I'm like,
Dad.
This is what you get when you turn off the noise canceling feature, is like all whatever the hell is going on and you're like, ugh.
This is what you get when you turn off the noise canceling feature of your entire life and have a pet and a baby.